Fight Club, a movie whose philosophical ideas are usually overpowered by its insane plot. But I'm here to tell you that this movie is about you. It's about the emptiness that you feel in modern life. It's about the quiet search for something that's real, something that can give your life meaning. And in this video, I want to talk to you about the different philosophical ideas that this movie presents and the interesting ways in which it subverts them. Along with this, why this movie speaks to so many people in today's world and what lessons we can take from it to reshape our own lives. But first, let's talk a little bit about the history of Fight Club. Fight Club was released in the year 1999 and is based on the book of the same name. It was directed by David Fincher and it starred Brad Pitt and Edward Norton in leading roles. And when the movie was initially released, it was actually panned by critics worldwide, and even the audience hated this movie. But as the years passed, its reputation improved, and now it's achieved its well-deserved cult classic status. And many people even consider it to be one of the greatest pieces of fiction ever put to screen. So, let's dive into the movie. We start off the film with the narrator. He's a guy who's just like us. You know, someone who's never really lived a day in his life. Someone who's just been stuck in that same loop, mindlessly reliving his same day over and over again. And he never really asks himself, what I want to actually do with my life. He's working a job he hates, he buys things that he never really uses, and he goes to support groups for diseases that he doesn't even have. He does all of this just to find some value in life. He's basically trapped in a life and he finds no way to escape out of it. And that's why one of the first things we actually hear him say is that every time he's on a plane, he wishes for it to crash. Well, one day his wish does come true, just not in the way that he expected it. On the flight, he's sitting next to this charismatic soap salesman who gives him his bizarre theory that the oxygen masks on planes are there to keep people high so that they can accept their fate while the plane is crashing. And that man is Tyler Durden, and nothing in the movie stays the same after this. So Tyler is played by Brad Pitt, so it makes sense why he leaves a lasting impression. But so much so that when the narrator's apartment burns down and everything he owns is gone, the only person he calls is Tyler. They have a chat at a local restaurant, they share a beer, and then for some reason they fight. But for the narrator, this is the first time he actually feels alive. As we progress through the movie, we are able to understand what really intrigues the narrator about Tyler. See, if you think about it, Tyler is everything that the narrator is not. Tyler is confident where the narrator is shy. Tyler is charismatic where the narrator is wimpy. Tyler doesn't live in fear. He's already separate from all of these social norms and he doesn't really care about materialistic things or comfort. And that's why to the narrator, Tyler is basically the opposite of everyone else he knows in his life, whether it be at his work, his personal life, or the support groups that he attends. And what I believe is that Tyler in this movie is basically there to represent rebellion in its purest form. He's there as a stand-in for what a walking rejection of the system looks like. And Tyler has a few opinions about the system as well. So here the system stands for the societal norms that have been enforced on us in the modern times. And Tyler believes that these societal norms have created a generation of people who've had their identity suppressed just in order to follow them. And no one in the world really seems to care about this. So the movie initially starts off as a fight between these two men, but by the end it turns into a movement, into a rebellion against the modern comfort and pleasure that we've become so accustomed to in today's life. And on a surface level, Fight Club may just look like that. It might just look like a movie that's about this revolution, that's about this fight against the system. And to a certain extent, it is. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you will find that there's a deeply philosophical film that's hiding beneath all of the blood and chaos that's on the screen. When we see the narrator in the start of the movie, one thing is clear. He's a man who's living without purpose. He's not found any meaning in his life yet. And we've all felt that, We've all felt an emptiness, a sinking feeling that life really might not have any meaning after all. And the philosophical term for this is called existentialism. And existentialism is the idea that life doesn't really have any inherent meaning, and the actions that you take throughout your life give that meaning to you. It says that you're not really born with a purpose and you have to create it with the things that you do. And the narrator is someone who can embody that perfectly. He's basically an existential protagonist who hasn't found that meaning in his life yet. He's just living life through the motions, just going through his life day by day. He's someone who's decaying mentally in the life that he never chose. And then he meets Tyler, and to him, Tyler is a breath of fresh air, a lifeline, a way to get out of this existential dread.
Man, I see in Fight Club the strongest and smartest men who've ever lived. I see all this potential, and I see it squandered. God damn it, an entire generation pumping gas, waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
I believe Tyler represents something authentic to the narrator, something that's unfiltered, raw, something that he believes can give his life meaning. And a normal film would stop at that, but Fight Club is no normal film. It shows us that finding purpose in life doesn't mean that it's the right purpose. You can see at the end of the movie, Tyler's version of freedom actually turns into chaos. We can see that he doesn't really just want to escape society, but rather he wants to rebuild it based on his own values. So what the film really teaches us about this is that the only way we can get out of the feeling of being lost is to try to find your own meaning by your own terms, and not to cling to some other new set of ideals that you may find online or someone may tell you to follow. And that's what separates this movie from the other type of content that we're seeing online in the past few years. You know, this alpha male, red pill content that we've all seen. Unlike these people, the movie doesn't really just give you a checklist of ideals to follow. You know, you finish A, B, C, D, and then you have value. The film actually talks about taking the responsibility to find your own purpose in life without depending on anyone else. And that's why I believe that this movie is so much more relevant today, especially with the amount of content that we are consuming now. The amount of people who try to put us in boxes and try to give us some rules to follow. You should really take this movie as an example and try to introspect within yourself to try to find your own meaning in life rather than outsourcing your identity to something that you may see online or something that you think people may believe. So in the end, your meaning of life needs to be built by you and no one else. Okay. The other theme that's really deeply woven into the movie is anti-consumerism. I mean, the movie literally starts with the narrator's apartment that's completely filled with IKEA furniture. And he mentions that he buys this stuff not because of any need that he has, but because it makes him feel like he matters. Because in his head, the more possessions he has, the more value he has. And that's what consumerism is at its core. It's the idea that your worth is tied to the possessions that you hold. And on the opposite side, we have Tyler, a man whose anti-consumerist mindset is clear from the beginning. So when the narrator's apartment burns down, Tyler decides to give him a crash course on his anti-consumerism. And the first thing he does is he reframes the loss that the narrator just faced as freedom. Freedom from the things that he believed owned him. He tells the narrator that his worth isn't determined by what he owns. And one of the main points that he brings up, and one of the main points that's very relevant in today's world as well, is that we have an overabundance of products, of items, of ads. Everyone is trying to sell us something. We're living in a highly consumeristic society. And one of the main points that the film is asking us is, what's the point of chasing these newest trends? You know, the latest clothes, the latest phones, the best apartments. Why are we doing this if none of these things actually matter? What kind of hole are we trying to fill by buying these things? We can see Tyler's answer for this question, and we can see the disdain that he has for materialism, and his mindset is clear from the moment we enter his house. His house is crumbled. It has no furniture. There's electrical failures everywhere. There's leaks. And the reason he gives for living in such a bad condition is that he believes
Things you own end up owning you.
So what he's saying is that he's not really against buying things. What he's against is believing that those things give you value. He's against the value that people put on things that they buy and the value that they think they deserve because they have the latest items. It's not really about rejecting consumerism. It's about making us ask why we chase these things in the first place and why do we put so much emphasis on buying the latest things. The narrator goes through his entire journey where he realizes that his identity, not only materialistic but spiritual, mental, and emotional, is not tied to the things that he believed were true about himself. They don't own him. He believed he's not confident, he believed he's weak, and he believed he's scared. And that's why he needed to buy things, that's why he needed to create Tyler. And by the end, he realizes that he doesn't really need all of this. He realizes that they're all just symbols of the person that he never was. And the final lesson that the movie gives us is that real freedom isn't about owning anything. It's about realizing that you don't need any of it to be whole. So stop putting so much emphasis on things that don't really matter in life. Additionally, similar to existentialism, the movie also shows that taking anything to an extreme never works. I mean, the main reason that Tyler burns down the narrator's apartment is to teach him about anti-consumerism, which I mean is like a few steps ahead of what he should have done. Maybe he could have just tried talking to him first. He then forms a cult, he orders people to break down statues, to blow up buildings, and he turns the rebellion that he created into violence. So that's the brilliance if you think about it. This movie isn't really just telling us to question the system that we live in, it's also asking us to question the ways that we rebel against it. It's asking us if what we truly want is freedom, or do we just want to belong to another system that maybe we're more closely aligned to. Another interesting concept that this movie flips on its head is the ideal man. And I'm not just talking about Brad Pitt here, I'm talking about Nietzsche's ideal man, the Übermensch. So Nietzsche was this German philosopher who was really into nihilism and thinking that the world didn't really have a point. But he was also really popular for his philosophy about the ideal man. So what Nietzsche believed was that most people are sheep, blindly just following the shepherd without actually caring about what's happening to them. That's what he believed people are. He believed that they simply follow society's norms without ever raising questions. And for him, his ideal man was someone who makes their own rules, who lives authentically outside of the system. And if you think about it, that's the whole point of Tyler in the movie. He's the modern embodiment of this philosophy. Throughout the movie, we see him rejecting all of society's norms, and he's literally trying to build another society with his own values as the base.
You're not how much money you have in the bank. You're not the car you drive. You're not the contents of your wallet. You're not your fucking khakis. You were the all-singing, all-dancing crap of the world.
Fight Club doesn't really glorify him as well. Rather, it shows what happens when the man who has the correct philosophy goes overboard and becomes a tyrant. He's clear proof that what can start as a rebellion can easily just turn into another form of control. And at the end of the movie, we can see that the narrator's entire journey wasn't really about becoming Tyler. It was about surpassing him. I mean, he literally shoots himself to get rid of Tyler at the end of the movie, because he realizes that what Tyler was not built out of authenticity. It was built out of the fact that he thought that this is what was missing from his life. So in the end, he was just enslaved to another ideology. And the whole point shouldn't really be about taking down the system, but it's rather just to live authentically based on your own values. And finally, hypermasculinity. I mean, the movie is called Fight Club. Obviously, we're going to be talking about hypermasculinity. One of the main quotes that can summarize this movie is,
How much can you know about yourself? You've never been in a fight. I don't want to die without any scars. So come on, hit me before I lose my nerve.
So this is not an invitation to violence. It's not telling you to go pack up your bags and get the next flight to Dagestan. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor saying that growth and knowledge can only be found in discomfort, and that testing yourself is the only thing that can reveal who you truly are as a person. So the fighting in Fight Club represents something completely different. It actually represents the primal urges that society used to live by and those that we've become disconnected to. They were something that our ancestors had instilled in us, but modern society has removed. And one of the things that the film suggests is that fighting was also the norm, and it needs to be brought back to escape from this life of mediocrity. We see this throughout the movie, where a lot of the arguments and a lot of the issues were settled by a round of fighting, because that's what Tyler believes that his generation is missing. He believes that his generation is raised in comfort and they're stripped of this primal edge and trapped in systems that suppress their aggression and instinct. He wants men to behave like men again. I mean, the narrator did create him as this perfect beacon of traditional masculinity, because that's what he thought was missing from his life. Now note, I said traditional because a lot of the values that Tyler holds and shows throughout the film are very traditional in nature. And while Tyler does embody the ideal, the film actually critiques it. It shows us that this hyper-masculinity that the narrator created was just a reaction that the narrator had because of his shitty life, and it's not the solution to it. We can see that it tried to take the pain of the narrator and turn it into power, but what it actually did was take that power to an extreme and make it destructive. And by the end, even the narrator realizes that this aggressive, hyper-masculine archetype that he's created is not really the answer, and that true masculinity is actually about confronting your own darkness and taking responsibility for your own life. So on the surface level, Fight Club may just look like a movie that's about fighting or about rebelling against the consumer culture, or maybe it's about forming a cult and revolutionizing the world that we live in. But if you look a little bit deeper, it's actually a story of a man who's at war with himself. We see this raw exploration of the modern man who's living through existential crisis, who's trying to find meaning in his life, who's indulging in consumerism, and who wants to live a more traditionally masculine life. And that's why he creates Tyler. The narrator creates him because Tyler gives the narrator all of the things that he needs. He gives him the freedom to live like he wants. He gives him the power so that he doesn't have to follow any rules. And he gives him the meaning that he's sorely looking for throughout his life. But the film shows that this doesn't mean that you follow him blindly. It shows that any aspect, either chasing materialism or rejecting it entirely, both can be considered traps. It shows that Tyler's philosophy may feel liberating, but at the end, it's just another cage that you can get stuck in. And what the film really wants us to do, it wants us to look inwards. It forces us to confront the systems that we live by, to confront the illusions that we cling to, and the parts of ourselves that we suppress. It doesn't really just give us a guide to living life, but rather it points us to a mirror to remind us that meaning isn't found in things or in other people. And what we need to do is we need to build that meaning of our own lives by ourselves. And 26 years later, that message is more powerful than ever. Because in today's world, where content is so prolific, where media likes to paint masculinity and consumerism in black and white, Fight Club is there to remind us that life can be grey, and that the person who's promising you an escape could be just as dangerous as the system you're trying to get away from. And what we need to do in the end is we need to look back into the mirror, because true meaning in life can only be found by looking at yourself and finding it within you. Thank you everyone so much for watching the video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. And if you have any other recommendations for any other video ideas, please let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.